Hello, friends. This is Professor Googla. On my channel, you mostly watch videos about the beautiful world around us. But today, it's a little different. What is it about? Keep watching to find out. Myth 1. The neighborhoods of Pripyat and Chernobyl are inhabited by mutants. Putting aside speculative blog postings and eyewitness accounts about ogres with two heads spotted in the exclusion zone, mutants usually refer to animals that received a dose of radiation after the disaster at the nuclear power plant. This refers to both wild animals. The fauna in the vicinity of Pripyat is quite diverse and includes roe deer, wolves, bears, foxes, wild boars, and domestic animals, for example, dairy cows left free range after the evacuation of people. Over the past 3 decades since the disaster, photos and videos of allegedly mutated animals, birds and fish have repeatedly appeared online. One of the most famous recordings captured giant catfish swimming in the cooling pond of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. According to eyewitnesses, the 50-plus kilogram weight is the result of radiation exposure. Fishermen, familiar with this fish firsthand, only laughed. Catfish, if you do not prevent them from fattening up with regular catching, easily grow up to 100 and more kilograms. According to scientific papers, the Chernobyl accident paradoxically benefited the local fauna. For example, in 2016, the results of a study were published, which showed that the population of wild animals moose, roe deer, wild boars in the NPP zone reached a number comparable to the population of these animals in the reserves of Belarus. And if we talk about individual species, for example, wolves, their population has increased several times. That is, the animals did not just take over the territory after humans left, but retained the ability to reproduce and successfully adapted. However, what about mutations? Did cows start giving birth to calves with 2 heads? Apparently not. One 2004 study by an international group of scientists, including radiobiologist Sergei Fizenko, an IAEA expert and former liquidator of the accident consequences, tells us that animals in general suffered the consequences of the accident much more easily than humans. For example, the radiation had almost no effect on the inhabitants of water bodies. As for cows, the Timiryazev Agricultural Institute studied the animals living in the exclusion zone and came to the following conclusion. No increase of mutant individuals is found in the studied species under conditions of chronic action of increased level of ionizing radiation. According to these data, the chronic low-dose irradiation zone does not turn normal animals into mutants. Biological species adapt differently. New generations of animals emerge that are better adapted to life under such conditions. If there have been terrible mutations in animals, they are not seen today. Natural selection plays a big role here. Animals with severe mutations that significantly impaired their lives and increased difficulty or inability to adapt and reproduce would generally be culled from the population. Obviously, most of the images on the internet are fakes, either not from Chernobyl, video games, movies, Photoshop, are completely unrelated. Nevertheless, some mutations did occur. On farms in the Narodichi region of Ukraine, for example, in the first 4 years after the accident, about 350 animals were born with gross deformities such as missing or extra limbs, missing eyes, heads, ribs, or deformed skulls. Therefore, answering the question, are there mutants in Chernobyl? The answer is yes. Do mutant humans exist in Chernobyl? No. No matter how many stories stalkers tell, and not a single documentary evidence is not. Indeed, photos of those places often look horrifying. Giant trees sprouting through the roofs of houses, rusted to the ground garage structures, household garbage, and packs of abandoned dogs. It's eerie to be there at night, and during the day these landscapes resemble images from a post-apocalyptic movie, but that's probably all. Multi-headed people and giants with a dozen eyes are not found here. Scientists have been trying for more than 60 years to understand how radiation affects humans and what dose of radiation is needed to trigger a mutation process in the human body. Despite the abundance of frightening photos of survivors and their children, the result of these conditions was the fact of radiation exposure, which by no means always leads to real changes at the gene level. You can meet giant mushrooms in Chernobyl, but they won't have eyes, and they certainly won't try to eat you. The same goes for other living creatures. The terrible stamp of what happened will lie on these places for years, maybe even centuries, as a reminder that every mistake will have to be paid for. Myth 2. Well, plants are definitely mutating. At least look at the pictures of the redwood forest. The Red Forest, also known as Rusty and Red, a favorite of Zone fans, is a 200 square kilometer area of mostly pine trees adjacent to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Coniferous trees of this forest at the time of the accident took on a huge dose of radiation, as a result of which in a matter of minutes, burned, changing color from green to brick red. According to biologists, this happened as a result of chlorophyll destruction. The changes did not end there. After the accident, eyewitnesses noticed that the surviving trees and new, young pine trees had become strange. That is, stunted, with chaotically sticking out tufts of needles. Some of the young pines grew white. According to other accounts, in the first days after the accident, some trees glowed allegedly due to the interaction of radioactive substances with tree enzymes. That these stories have not been documented. Biologists explain the specific arrangement of needles and stunting of pines not by mutations, but by the same adaptability of plants to the conditions. Radiation first of all affects the tops of pine trees, so the trees began to grow not upward, but broadly. The whitening of individual bunches of needles is connected with residual phenomena of chlorophyll destruction. At the same time, such changes may not be inherited. Myth 3. No one lives in Chernobyl and Pripyat, only stalkers and ghosts live there. No, it's not. Life there, of course, is not booming as it used to be. But in Chernobyl, according to 2017 data, about 700 people live there permanently. About 3,000 more people come there to work on a rotational basis and serve the enterprises of the exclusion zone. Chernobyl has a working police force, its own gym, house of culture, library and bus station. Scientists have long ago confirmed that the radiation level in the city and its vicinity does not exceed permissible limits. However, the past of these territories makes an imprint. Local residents periodically come to the city hospital to undergo radiometric monitoring on a radiation spectrometer. Also, workers of Chernobyl enterprises receive higher wages and longer vacations from 40 to 56 days, depending on the harmfulness of production. Finally, several thousand tourists come to the city every year, both solo stalkers and groups with guides. Myth 4. The Chernobyl zone is still so phonemic that it's a big deal. In those places, an elevated radiation background does persist. However, the radiation covers the territory in peculiar spots. In general, according to scientists, radiation levels in the modern Chernobyl zone are safe for short-term visits and relatively safe for permanent residence in those places where there is no contamination spot. For example, in 2017, a team of activists from Moscow measured radiation in various parts of Chernobyl and its suburbs, including at the nuclear power plant itself. In most of the Chernobyl areas, radiation ranged from 15 to 20 microrengens per hour. This is a background contamination level corresponding to a typical large city. In the vicinity of the nuclear power plant, the pollution is already about 50-60 mcr per hour, and in some places it jumps up to 150,200 mcr per hour. At the plant itself, in some rooms 400,500 mcr per hour were recorded. However, even such radiation is not capable of causing harm to health, if we are talking about staying in these areas for several hours. For comparison, 33 years ago, on April 26, the radiation background in the city of Pripyat was 1 million mcr per hour, i.e., 1 Röntgen per hour. Friends, don't hesitate to write comments under the video about what else you would like to learn. I will definitely fulfill your wish. Bye for now.